So a player was killed for committing an own goal.
Colombia qualified for the 1994 World Cup in the United States by finishing top of their group. During those qualification stages, they remained unbeaten and would eventually seal their place at the...
This is definitely going to have to do with drug cartels, because he just mentioned two things, Colombia in the 90s, and all I remember about, obviously I wasn't really alive during this time, but the only thing I remember in history about this era is Colombia and drug cartels. So that's what this is going to have to deal with.
Comprising of Adolfo Valencia, Carlos Valderrama, and Parma's flamboyant and often brilliant Faustino Asprilla, they were expected to go far in this World Cup. Famously, Pelé himself tipped them to reach at least the semi-finals. And if they were to live up to those expectations, Colombia would also depend on the performances of Andrés Escobar, a centre-back from Atlético Nacional, who had quietly become one of the best defenders in South America.
Andrés Escobar.
The rise of Colombian football during that period was notorious. As early as the beginning of the 1970s, domestic football in the country had become a money laundering vehicle for drug traffickers. In the 1980s, as the value of cocaine exportation grew, up to and beyond $4 billion per year, so the number of clubs in cartel hands grew, and the wealth of the game exploded. On the pitch, the consequence was a remarkable rise. Better players, better teams, better coaches. But while Colombian football was enormously successful, it could also be deadly. While clubs were principally acquired as laundering tools, they also became a proxy for a conflict between the various cartels. Principal among those was the Cali cartel, led by the Orejuela brothers, and Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel. Inevitably, given the money and ego at stake on the pitches, stories of violence and intimidation were hardly rare. One referee was murdered. Another reported being threatened with death if he didn't favour Pablo Escobar's Atlético Nacional in an important Copa Libertadores tie. So, narco soccer's legacy is deeply tainted. But the Colombian team that travelled to the '94 World Cup was still talented, and in a group containing the USA, Romania and Switzerland, was expected to encounter few difficulties in advancing to the knockout stage. But
it's an easy group.
It was actually far harder than anyone could have imagined. Against Romania, the Colombians were beaten by a magical Gheorghe Hagi performance and some inspired goalkeeping from Bogdan Steler, as they lost 3-1. Back home, Colombia was still burning. Pablo Escobar's death in late 1993 had done little to quell the drug-related violence in the country or diminish the authority of the cartels. Even before the tournament started, the dark hand of the drug war tapped on the team's shoulder. Ahead of that must-win second game, coach Pacho Maturana was about to give his team talk at the hotel when he received a threat, claiming that if he selected midfielder Gabriel Gomez, his own family and that of his player would be murdered. Given no choice, Gomez left the camp to be with his family and retired from international football. The coach, according to his assistants, was tearful and visibly shaken. The players were also terrified. Recalling the atmosphere before the game, Faustino Asprilla recalls calling his own family and telling them to hide. He told journalist Richard Sanders that we knew there would be trouble if we didn't win and that we would be killed. The US game was a disaster. In The Two Escobars, an ESPN documentary, fearful players recalled standing for the national anthem before the match and, rather than focusing on the 90 minutes ahead, wondering where the assassin's bullet might come from.
Wow.
Little surprise then that Colombia's football was inhibited and error-ridden in the first half. Or that in the 35th minute, Andrés Escobar stretched to clear a miss-hit John Hark's shot, but succeeded only in diverting it beyond his own goalkeeper. The centre-back was a quiet leader who abhorred the drug trade and its impact upon his country's international reputation. He captained his club team, Atlético Nacional, and won both.
That is really awful. The fact that I'm sitting here, in 2022 on a couch in New Orleans, Louisiana, and the only thing really that I know about Colombia, like immediately what pops into my head is drug cartels, right? Like drugs. Like the main export of Colombia to the world has been Shakira, coffee, and cocaine. It's like drugs in cartels is the first thing that pops in my mind when I think of Colombia. I had a Colombian roommate when I lived in Dallas for college, and you know, his name is Aaron, and you know, we had a good time, but you know, he gave me lots of amazing coffee and candy from Colombia. But it's just sad for their sake, like that their country is known for drugs and corruption and crime. And it's like, man, I'm sure that there's a lot more that Colombians have to offer the world, and it's probably upsetting to them that that's what they're known for. Anyway.
Both the Copa Libertadores and the Colombian Primera Liga. He was in his peak as a player and was set to move to AC Milan following the tournament's conclusion. He was also due to marry his longtime fiancée.
Oh man, this is sad.
But he wouldn't move to Italy, and he wouldn't get married. There was no way back for Colombia. 1-0 became 2-0 in the second half, and while they did score a late consolation, they fell to their second consecutive defeat. They did beat Switzerland in their final game, but Romania's win over the USA meant that Colombia were the first country eliminated from the World Cup. After the tournament, Escobar returned to Medellin. Just 5 days after the World Cup, he went out to a local nightclub with friends. At the end of the evening, he became embroiled in an argument with 3 men in a car park. And after he got in his car, he was shot multiple times. Each bullet accompanied by a mocking shout of "Gol," mimicking the cry of the South American football commentators. Escobar would later die in hospital. He was 27 years old. To this day, the motivation for the crime remains unclear. Some speculate that it was retribution for the own goal and for lost gambling earnings among those who'd bet on Colombia to beat the United States. Others, including Pacho Maturana, believe that Andres Escobar was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was buried in Medellin, his casket draped in the green and white colours of his team. Covering the funeral, the Los Angeles Times reported shouts for justice among the mourners and a eulogy delivered by the country's president, Cesar Gaviria, in which Andres Escobar was described as a loyal player, a complete man, and a model Colombian. A cartel bodyguard would admit to the crime, but only served 11 years in prison, despite originally being sentenced to over 40. Wow. If you liked today's video, please subscribe to the channel.
Another excellent video from Tifo Football, just helping me, gain knowledge of the history of this game. A really sad story. Sad that that he would be killed for an own goal. It's kind of conflicting because I want to be excited for the USA winning a game, but also, nobody should lose their life for a mistake that they make on the pitch. Anyway, if you enjoy what you saw in this video, you like learning about the game of football, you like history, studying those kind of things, and you love sports, you would love Luke Sports Academy, because that's basically what we do here, is we react to sports and we learn history about the sports. That's what we do here. So I'll see you guys in the next video.